Welcome to New Perspectives on Integral and Transformational Learning, hosted by our university and Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center in Surat and Fountain in South Carolina. It is a platform for the exploration of new perspectives in integral education, social development, integral yoga topics, and art and culture. Our aim is to facilitate presentations and interactions of different experts and researchers in different fields of endeavor, creating an interdisciplinary and interactive platform where all perspectives may find their true place, leading to more harmonious and comprehensive ways of living. Today is a topic of the utmost importance, the ideal of human unity, which is usually easily misunderstood. For this panel discussion, we invited a prominent speaker and a teacher in the field of Indian culture, social and political thought of Sri Aurobindo, Professor Kittu Reddy. Professor Kittu Reddy graduated from Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education in 1957 and started teaching there the foundations of Indian culture, political and social sciences. From 1987, he has been giving talks to the Indian Army on motivation and leadership and the mission of India. He has written a number of books, to mention a few: Secularism, Religion and Spirituality, History of India, A New Approach, A Vision of United India, Problems and Solutions, etc., etc. He has been giving talks to a number of universities in India on social sciences and world unity, education in India, etc. I was myself privileged to be attending his courses on foundations of Indian culture, which he presented for a few years at Savitri Bhavan in Auroville. So I should briefly mention the topics of today's discussion. So Kittu Da will speak about 25-30 minutes on the topic, and then we will open to the questions and answer sessions. Please put your questions into the box of question and answers box. So at the end we can read them out and answer. So just to mention the topic today, the concept of human unity and the role of nationalism and internationalism in achieving it in the light of Sri Aurobindo, as well as the role of India in facilitating the coming of the spiritual age of humanity. So please, Kittu Da.
First of all, I will start with one brief anecdote, or not anecdote, actually what happened. And at that time, Mother was here, and Sri Aurobindo started the Arya on 15th of August, 1914. On the 15th of August, 1915, he started writing a book called The Ideal of Human Unity. People are wondering, when this massive disunity is taking place, when the whole world is involved in these wars, how does this gentleman write a book on human unity? And the answer is that human unity is not something that depends on human beings. It is bound to happen. Nature has decided that it will happen, and it will happen. Now, there are two ways by which it can happen. Either it can happen as a result of human aspiration, opening, understanding, goodwill, etc., or it will happen by crashing circumstances. So, now this is a very important thing, because you see, 1914, it was a war in which the whole world was involved, because the powerful European nations had colonies all over the world, and they used and exploited their colonies. There were at least 1 million Indian soldiers who fought in Africa and other parts of the world. And so that's why it became a world war. And as a result of the World War, almost immediately after the World War in 1919, there was a reaction to this, and they created what is known as a League of Nations. Now, this League of Nations was, as Shobana says, a very positive step in the right direction. But apparently, the motive was not so pure because they didn't want war because it was very disruptive. And it was disruptive of the life of the powerful nations. And they wanted peace not because they loved humanity, but so that is one of the main factors of the League of Nations. The second thing is that it was made up of only 50 nations. Today in the United Nations, there are almost 200 nations, around 200 nations. But there are only 50 nations. And so India, for example, was represented by Great Britain. Indochina was represented by France. The South American nations were represented by Spain and Portugal. So the Germans were humiliated badly. Now here a little history is necessary because we are speaking of nation. And when we speak of a nation in the political sense, that means a nation who has got a head who is in charge of the whole nation. It can be either elected or by any other method, but there has to be somebody who is in charge of a nation. So India was a nation 5,000 years back. But India became a nation only in 1858 after Queen Victoria became the head empress, right? And she sent a representative called the viceroy. So until then, India was culturally a nation, but not politically a nation. And of course, in 1947, we got our freedom. We became an independent nation. So now it is important to understand that when I use the word nation, I don't use it in the cultural way. I mean that there is one authority at the top who has the power to take decisions, whether it is elected like in India and most other countries, or whether it is in like China, that's a different matter. That I will not discuss at all. Now, this concept of nation started in the 16th and 17th century. Now, you see, man is a gregarious being. And the smallest unit, collective unit, was the family. Gradually, it became a village or a cluster of villages. Then it became the province, the state, and today it is a nation. The biggest living collective unit, the word is living collective unit, is nation. There are continental unities, like the European unity, but it is riddled with problems, it is not living. And that is one very important thing that happened. And the second thing is that whenever we speak of nation, we speak that it is not only the geography, that is the land, the people, the culture, the language, but also something which one can conceive, but one cannot perceive with the external senses, and that is the soul. The soul of a nation. And that is why, as Shravinda says, that just like the individual being, many people will say has a soul, but Shravinda says no, he is a soul which has a body, a life force, and a mind. Similarly, nations, not all nations, but many nations, have a soul which has a body, a life temperament, their habits, their ways of everything, dressing, eating, etc., etc. and a mind, a typical mind which belongs to that nation. So there is the British mind, there is the French mind, there is the Indian mind, and so on and so forth, right? So now this idea and concept of nation started in the 16th or 17th century when England became united under Elizabeth. And after that, of course, it was at that time a royal rule. Gradually, it moved on and it became a democratic thing and we became parliamentary democracy. The French got united a little later, and it was the Bourbons who managed to unite and make France a nation. Now, the moment you become a nation, well organized, you are very powerful because the financial power is under you, the economic power is under you, the military power is under you, and the political power is under you. So, England, France, Spain, Portugal, they were among the first nations of the world, and they were very strong. And they used that strength immediately to annex and conquer other nations. So England conquered India. Oh, and when I say India, it is a subcontinent of India. It is not just a small little country, right? France conquered Indochina. Spain and Portugal went into South America. And then the whole thing became. Now, at that time, Germany was not a nation. Italy was not a nation. Italy was made up of city-states. In the 19th century, in 1865 or 1863, at that time Germany had the greatest musicians, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. It had the greatest writers, Goethe. It was technically highly developed. Right? So it was very subjectively strong and developed because say, music and all these things are not objective things, but they are also objectively very, very strong. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of this in great detail in the 4th chapter and the 5th chapter of the Human Cycle. And so Germany found that it is in many ways more developed than, say, England and France, in some ways at least, right? But it has hardly any power. England has got the whole of much of Asia, France has also got much of Asia, Spain and Portugal have got the whole of South America. Inevitably, this led to a kind of complex. And they wanted to also have their colonies. So since there were not many left, so they tried to get into Africa. And at the same time, they had a superiority complex also, because they were highly developed, wonderful in music, wonderful in poetry, wonderful in art, wonderful in technical matters. And so then they decided that they will make a link between Germany, Berlin, and India. So they decided to make a road where heavy trucks can go from Berlin to Kabul, and from Kabul to India is just a hop. And this certainly did not satisfy the English and the French felt very uncomfortable about this, because for them India was the jewel of their crown, you see, and they didn't want to lose that in any way. At the same time, let us have no doubt in saying that the Germans were very arrogant. And they brought in an idea called the Aryan race. Along with the Aryan race, there was something called the Aryan culture. And they believed that the Aryan culture was the highest, best culture in the world. And they also believed that this whole world must accept this Aryan culture. So we'll try to spread the Aryan culture. To those who are willing to accept it, very good, there is no problem. To those who are not willing to accept it, we will eliminate them. So Sri speaks of one tribe called the Hereros, which the Germans tried to eliminate. Now this is something which is very, very disturbing, this arrogance. If they were humble and not arrogant with that high culture, there would have been no problem. Other cultures would have accepted it quite normally and quite naturally. But because of their arrogance, tremendous arrogance, they created an antagonism, especially in Britain, France, Spain, and Portugal. So, as a result of this arrogance, they decided to attack Belgium because in 1871 there was a war with France, and they absolutely smashed the French people. In a very short time, I think even less than 2 weeks, France had to surrender. And France never forgot that. They were always preparing to take revenge against the Germans. And the Germans also were very aware that the French have a very strong antipathy towards the Germans. So in 1914, as a result of that arrogance and that inferiority complex of not having any colonies, they decided two things, as I said, to build a road between Berlin to Kabul as a gateway to India. And the second one was that they decided to attack France. So they moved towards Poland and then they attacked France. Immediately, England realized that this will not stop, we'll have to declare war against them. So England declared war. And there was a terrific war which lasted for 4 years. And this was the first time that we had a world war. Because this world war, why was it a world war? Because all the colonies of the British, the French, the Spanish, and the Portuguese were involved. So the whole world got involved. And then after 4 years, Germany was defeated. And not only defeated, but very badly humiliated. The punishment that they gave to Germany was terrible. They were not allowed to have an army bigger than 15,000 people, a navy bigger than 10,000 people. Many of their lands were stripped away and taken away. And the most, not fertile land from the agricultural point of view, but the land where they had all the minerals, which were extremely important, were taken away from Germany. And Germany was very, very badly humiliated. And the Germans were a proud race, but at that time they were a very weak race. But in 1930, a gentleman called Hitler, he decided that we have to avenge the defeat of the First World War. Unfortunately for Germany, Hitler was a possessed man, a man who had certain occult capacities, and he used to hear voices, and these voices were of the hostile powers. You see, when there is that motive for revenge, the inner being is very badly disturbed. And when the inner being is badly disturbed, you are an easy prey to the lower forces, to hostile forces, and to dark forces. So Hitler was possessed, and in 1936 he became a full-fledged dictator. And he was supported by the Germans. All the intellectuals supported Germany because they wanted Germany to become very strong and to take a kind of revenge for the 1914 defeat. Anyway, that is what happened exactly. And so in 1939, he had established a dictatorship At the same time, Italy, which is also not a nation, except in 1860s, and there were three persons who were responsible for the development of Italy: Mazzini, Cavour, and Garibaldi. Sure, has written a lot about them. Mazzini was the idealist. Cavour was a practical man who was ready to compromise. And Garibaldi was living in South America. And he had an army called the Red Army. And when he found that Italy was under pressure, he brought his Red Army, fought the battles, won the battles, and went back to South America. He had no ambition whatsoever. Very interesting man. Anyway, so Germany became a fascist country completely under the control of one gentleman called Hitler. Italy also, and Italy was always remembering that they were part of an empire, the Roman Empire, which had at that time almost half the world under their control. And they were dreaming of those old days. And so they also tended to become fascists. So Germany and Italy became fascist. And in 1939, they attacked first Belgium and then France. Immediately, England declared war. Sherbindo in 1936 wrote a sonnet. I don't remember the name of the sonnet, but in that sonnet, he clearly mentioned that Hitler is hostile force. He is possessed by dark forces. Mother also said that he is possessed by dark forces. And those who support Hitler, they are also on the wrong side. And unfortunately, when the Second World War broke out, Gandhiji did not openly support, but since he was against war, he did not stand by the Allies. Nehru, whose psychic being, as mother says, was a little more developed, right? He immediately, automatically wanted to support the British. But because of Gandhi's influence, he could not support the British. Anyway, the Second World War started. It was a terrible war. And then in 1941, December 7th, Japan attacked America, Pearl Harbor. So America joined the war. The First World War, they did not join. They were only moral support and economic support. But this time now they joined the war. And that made a whole difference. And then something happened in 1942. Germany attacked Russia. Russia was not in the war. It was standing out, neutral. As mother said, she sent a voice to Hitler, attack Russia. And so this foolish man, not being able to realize, he attacked Russia. The result was that on the side of the Allies were England, France, Spain, Portugal, and all the colonies of the war that were under these countries. And on the other side was Germany, Italy, and Japan. Japan also had a very strong urge at that time, not now, at that time, to become, an imperial power and to dominate the world. Ultimately, the war ended in 1945 with the dropping of two atom bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was the end of the Second World War. And immediately, the first consequence was that the United Nations organization was formed, UNO. And this time they made no mistake. I mean, they made much lesser mistakes. All the countries of the world were to be included, and they also demanded that all the countries and the nations of the world should be given freedom. So inevitably, within 2 years, India got its freedom. In fact, in 1946, the whole movement started, and ultimately we got our freedom. But because of our folly, it was a divided nation, India and Pakistan. And gradually, all the nations became free. So you see, now this is one of the things that Sri Aurobindo and the mother say, that goodwill, understanding, love for peace, genuine love for peace, not merely to exploit, are ideal things. Otherwise, it will be crashing circumstances. And it was crashing circumstances that brought about the freedom of India. That is why Sri Aurobindo told many of his very early disciples, do not worry about the freedom of India, it is all settled. It is the world circumstances that will give the freedom to India. We don't have to fight at all. And that is exactly what happened. In 1946, the cabinet mission came and discussions were taking place about the new constitution. And unfortunately, because we blundered a lot, so Pakistan was created. And within a few years, more and more nations began to become free. And ultimately, as today, there are 200 nations that are free. And most of these nations, without exception, most, not all, are understanding, not willing to try to dominate and exploit others, at least not openly, except probably China and North Korea. And inevitably, you can write it down that China will have to face very serious consequences because of this. And in 1950, July, Sri Aurobindo told Niruddha, it is not in writing, but he told Niruddha that China will break up into three. I cannot forecast the time, but it is inevitable that it will break up into three. And then I spoke of the nation soul, no? Now Pakistan has no soul. Because when K.M. Munshi came in 1950, and on July 11th he had an interview with Sri Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo stated categorically that Pakistan has been created by falsehood, fraud, and force. And it must be brought under India's military ambit. Military ambit. And Munshi could not believe this. He asked him to repeat the sentence, and he again said, Pakistan has been created by falsehood, fraud, and force, and it has to be brought under India's military ambit. I got this from Amal Kiran. I went to his house much later, and I got it. And then I wrote a letter to mother in 1967 that as a teacher of ideal of human unity for already quite a few years, I believe that Pakistan will not last, it will go. And mother wrote to me in French, La disparition du Pakistan est inévitable. The disappearance of Pakistan is inevitable. Then she wrote, Elle aurait déjà dû se disparaître. Mais l'ignorance humaine l'a retardée. It should have already happened, disappeared, but human ignorance has delayed it. So you see, we got so many chances. In the 1965 war, mother sent a message to Lal Bahadur Shastri. In the 1971 war, mother wanted the war to continue and India should take over not only Bangladesh, but also the western side. But we were not sufficiently open and wide. So anyway, I brought this up because all nations do not have souls. And the sign that there are souls, and somewhere Sri Aurobindo has said categorically, or mother has said, that England, France, America, even Germany have a soul. But in the search for the soul, one can go wrong. So in the 5th chapter of the human cycle, there is a chapter called True and False Subjectivism. And that is something which all those who are practicing yoga or trying to become spiritual must remember. that when you go in, going in is not a guarantee that you will go up. You might go down also. And then you become a prey of the lower forces. So you must be very careful. And therefore, mother always insisted, first come in contact with your psychic being, even a temporary contact, and then try to make it permanent. And if you can make this contact permanent, then you're absolutely secure. And then you can hear the inner voice, which is the true spiritual voice, which will lead you to a higher thing. So all nations today must turn towards their inner being. And so somebody asked Mother, in fact I was one of those who asked Mother, so what is the step there? How can we contribute? Mother said, only one way. You come in contact with your soul. Then you don't have to speak about soul, right? Your vibrations itself will do the whole work. They will change everything. So we have to start with ourselves. Every nation must try to become conscious of its soul. And that was Mother's and Sri Aurobindo's hope. That if India becomes conscious of its soul, of its inner being, and tries to discover that inner being, it will set an example to the world. And that will help all other nations of goodwill all over the world. And when that goodwill is there, inevitably, unity will come about. And that goodwill should be gradually transferred to the next word, that is love. Love is the key to everything. And so once Mother told me personally, if you want to progress in spiritual life, love Sri Aurobindo, love the Mother, because there is no difference between Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. So love Sri Aurobindo. And then you will see that you will come closer and closer to your inner being, and you will be protected from all evil influences, evil forces, etc., etc. So this much I can tell you, that what I said at the very beginning, that the world will become united, whether by force of crashing circumstances or by the higher power of goodwill, understanding, peace, and ultimately love. Now, if we can do this much, then we will go in a very peaceful way, and one need not forecast a third world war. But if we do not do that, I mean, if the world, the nations of the world do not do that, then, well, God knows, there might be all kinds of suffering. But suffering or no suffering, even after the suffering, even after a huge destruction, again we will start all over again. And next time, I think we'll have learned our lesson. So basically, this is the idea. I believe that there will be no third world war. And that is because the supramental has descended on earth. In 1950, it descended into Sri Aurobindo's body, and that is why his body was shining for 5 days. I've seen that with my own eyes, right? I don't say golden light, but shining absolutely. And then in 1956, as Mother herself stated, that the supermind has entered the earth consciousness. So the supermind will not allow a war. We might come on the brink, but a war will not be allowed. So basically that's it. I believe that we are going to be united and we are going to be one. And the future of the world is very, very bright. And there India, and I would say the devotees and disciples of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo have a very important role to play. Goodwill towards all, love towards all, under whatever circumstances, however much they might hate you, always right. So that's it basically. Now, if you have any questions, you can give it to me in writing. Then I will answer.
Kittu, there is a question written here in the box of question and answers. You can see it.
Yeah.
What is your perspective regarding the new educational policy of the government?
So,
do you see it? You can click on the box and see the question.
I'm not getting the box. I don't know where the box is.
Box is below, question and answers, Q&A.
You asked me a question?
Yes, the question is asked by someone.
It doesn't matter whoever it is.
Yes. What is your perspective regarding the new education policy of the government in India?
Regarding the policy of the government of India.
New education policy. There is a new education policy.
Yes, new education policy, it's a big step forward. I will not say it is perfect or it is totally satisfactory, but it is a very big step forward. First of all, it has left every individual student to grow by himself, to choose his own vocation. And secondly, they have reduced the importance of merely academics and examinations. So this is a very big step forward. And I can tell you this much, that I have met Narendra Modi myself personally when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat. And it happened that I had gone to Baroda, the center there, and I had written a book on Indian history, which was translated into Hindi. So they told me, why don't you go and give it to Narendra Modi? I said, how do I go? I've never met him, I don't know him. He said, we'll arrange. So next day they arranged. And in half an hour, I reached from Baroda to Ahmednagar. And as soon as I came in to his office, he sent for me. He called me. And I brought out two blessing packets from my pocket, one of Mother and one of Shravinda, and gave them to him. And then he brought out his purse and said, here, I've got two blessing packets, which I always carry with me. Blessing packets of Mother and Shravinda. But anyway, since you have given me so much goodwill and love, I will take them. And he put them back in his purse. And I have been told by Kumud Ben that he used to come frequently, late at night, 11:30 at night. And 3 or 4 times he has gone to Mother's room. For he had so much regard for Mother and Shravinda. So certainly he is in the right direction. And I believe that he will lead India towards spirituality, because he accepts Mother and Shravinda, and he is the only Prime Minister who, in all his speeches in the Red Fort on the 15th of August, have referred to Shravinda openly and loudly. So this is a very positive step.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it.
Thank you. There is another question from the same person. There has been much churning in the Indian political arena since the coming of the new government. Do you see it in the direction of envisioned by the Mother and Sri Aurobindo?
See, I will not say that this government is perfect, but certainly this government is better than the previous governments, and it has done some very good things. First of all, it has digitized the economy, as a result of which black marketing has come down in a very big way. There is not too much black money today. It is impossible to eliminate black money, because as long as man is what he is, there will be some black money. But he has given power to women. He has removed this talak, 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 by which a Muslim man could just tell his wife, 4 wives or 5 wives, now I'm divorcing you and out you go, and I don't care for you anymore. All that he has given. So he has given some kind of dignity to women. He has given toilets to every family. Now, do you understand that in a village where there are no toilets, it's most undignified for women to go early in the morning or late at night to the riverside and get themselves cleaned. And if they have no river, there is a real problem for them. I know it because I am coming from a village. And when I was there at the age of 4 or 5, I remember that we had to go out to some places, right? So he has done a lot of good things. And this churning is inevitably, not liked by certain parties, but that is all part of the game. We are moving forward. He has accepted spirituality as the ultimate goal. It will take a long time. It will not happen in 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 years even. But he has given a direction. And on the whole, the country has accepted. The latest opinion polls done by a foreign group has given Narendra Modi 83% acceptance. 7% or 10% we don't know. And 7% we are against him. Now 83% in your second term, after having won the first election, in 5 years rule, and then again in the second term after 1 year, that's already a very clear indication that people are with him. And that is a very happy feature, because if the country is divided, it is not good for the country.
Yes, thank you, Kittu. There is another question.
Tell you is that every movement of progress, individually or collectively, means churning. Because you have to give up many of the old things and they don't want to go easily. So there will be a churning that will take place. But ultimately you will move upwards, right? And I can tell you from my own personal experience, because I was very free and frank with the mother when I told her about my lower nature, some of the problems which I have got and I want to get rid of them. She put all her force and support, but it was a terrible churning. It was not easy. It took me a few years, but then gradually, as a result of the churning, I moved forward. And I went on moving forward, right? So all progress involves churning. Otherwise, you become stagnant, like the animal, and not progressive. So if you are progressive, there will be churning. So anything else?
Yes, thank you very much. There is one more question.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to have met you and interacted with you.
Yes, Kittu, there is one more question.
Yes.
It is about what Sri Aurobindo and Mother said about soul purpose of United States of America. About the soul of the United States.
A message in 1948 to the United States of America. And it was a very positive message. You see, because one of the characteristics of the United States is their love of freedom. And that is a very, very positive sign. So Sri Aurobindo believed that they might have a dominating instinct because they are very powerful financially and militarily and technologically. They might have that instinct, but because they love their freedom so much, right, they have a very good chance of coming in contact with the soul. And they will not give up their freedom so easily. And I have my nephew and my niece who are living there in America for more than 25 years. And they say, look, there are many things which we don't like in America, but one thing which we cannot deny is the tremendous amount of freedom that is given, right? And that is a very, very positive thing. You can criticize Trump on his face. He can't do anything about it. Because freedom is the essence of life. And no genuine progress can take place if there is no freedom. And somewhere in the human cycle, in the chapter called the Supernatural Ultimate of Life, he said, even when you are dealing with your lower nature, a certain amount of imposed discipline is necessary. But ultimately, the change will take place only when you freely change. You have to give up your own lower nature. By compulsion, your lower nature will not change. It will be suppressed. And the moment that force is removed, it will burst out.
Yes, there is another question.
Oh, sure.
In Indian perspective, we have seen that so many people are still being following the political parties, which are usually directed by falsehood and corruption. Is this because of their ignorance?
No,
What are the remedies?
You see, there is corruption all over the world. In India, the corruption has reduced a little bit. But I will tell you one thing. Once Uda went to Delhi, and he said that one of my friends who is in the political circle told me that many years back that there is tremendous amount of corruption in the government of India. Mother said there is a tremendous amount of corruption in the government of India. Why? There is corruption in me also. See, my cells of the body, they are not responding to the higher source. So don't bother about others' corruption. Look at your own corruption. And what is our definition of corruption? Anything that is not turned towards the divine in you is corrupt. You might be a successful man, you might be a progressive man, but it must be turned towards the divine. And only that which is turned towards the divine is not corrupt. So you say immediately the whole situation changes. So always we come back to the same thing. You want to remove corruption in the world, remove corruption in you. And what is the definition of corruption? Turn every part of your being towards the divine. And normally, as Ravindra said, it takes 30 years for somebody who is genuine. But now, after the supermind has descended, Mother said it can be done even in 1 year. In 1 year, you can transform your nature. Not the physical being, but the vital nature and the mental nature can all be turned towards the divine.
There is one more question from my side.
Right.
The role of ashram and Auroville, these two creations, what do they represent and what they are meant to do?
I can't hear the question. Vladimir, you repeat.
It's about ashram and Auroville relationship. Ashram and Auroville.
See, the ashram is a representative of humanity. All kinds of people are here. Some who have got a genuine and a very high aspiration, some who have a lesser aspiration, some who have come here because it is a very comfortable life here. Your food, your clothing, and everything else are given. You don't have to bother. And now, if you don't have an aspiration and have all these comforts, you will misuse them. And since it's the representative of humanity, you have a fairly big percentage which is aspiring for the divine, another percentage which is not very interested, and another that is. And in fact, I'll give you a story of the mother, which she herself related. She said, when I was young in Paris, many young men would come to me late in the evening after their work, traveling 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers. They had a very genuine aspiration. And I used to see that they were so sincere, but they had so much difficulty that they had not enough time for spirituality. So if any day I get a chance, I will create a place where people get all their basic needs of life so that all that surplus energy can be turned towards seeking the divine. And I got that in 1926, and I created the ashram. And what have I found? I have found here that there is no place in the world where people gossip more than in the ashram. So you see now, when she says that, it doesn't mean that everybody gossips. There is certainly a very powerful section which is very genuine in its aspiration. Whether they are in a powerful position or not is of no importance. And there are others who are somewhat neutral, and there are others who are not at all interested and taking full advantage of the place. And that is bound to happen. And in fact, as Mother said, that these people who are not taking advantage of the ashram are a great help to those who are really seeking, because they are tempting them with their lower nature. And then you will know really whether you are strong enough to face these temptations. And Sri Aurobindo's yoga is very difficult. In fact, he has said somewhere that please do not invite people to this yoga, because you have to be a hero of the highest type in order to, and it is very difficult yoga. But if you feel the call from within, and you are sure that it is the call from the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, give yourself wholeheartedly. And even if you don't do that, Mother will take care of you. Once she has set her eyes on a person, anywhere in the world, either in dream or vision, or in reality, she takes care of that person. I am with you, I will always be with you. If you are open, you will feel that. Or anything else?
Thank you, Kittu. It was wonderful. It was wonderful to speak to you, to listen to you,
Thank you very
your
much.
words. It was.
Good. I'm happy that you are happy. That is all.
Yes, it's a great delight to have a contact with you again over some
Yes,
time.
yes.
Thank you, Kittu, and wish you recovery and good health, and that Mother would take care of you and all your people, all your friends. So all the best. Thank you, everybody, for today's meeting. And I want to remind you that we will have a session on the 5th of September, which will be dedicated to integral education. So please join us on that webinar. Thank you and all the best. Namaste.